Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Johnny Mnemonic. Or Mnemonic? I'm assuming that's how it's pronounced. Maybe it's Mnemonic. Without maybe the end is silent. I don't know. Johnny. So, we go into this movie and it's a fairly simple concept where we have a guy who is having a race against time. We have Johnny who is to go into an elevator and to have a memory of 80 gigs in his back of his brain, kind of dumping a lot of long-term memory and not having a problem with it. So we have Johnny who is to dump a lot of his long-term memory to have a lot of storage to be placed into his brain to be able to courier or transport certain kind of data. So we have Johnny who is to seemingly have 80 gigs to be able to download or to download something, but we have him get an extender or an expander, and so he is to actually hold 160 gigs. So we have Johnny who seems to need one more gig, one more meaning job to be able to finally to be done with this life of taking and stealing data and really just be done with this all and get his long-term memory back. So we have Johnny who is to go and take a job that is even well beyond his gig space. We have seemingly these two men who are to come to Johnny to have him place in his head a 322 gig download into his brain, and they're consistently asking Johnny, like, are you sure you have the space for this? Like if anything, we could lose all of the data, or we could like this is a really important thing and you don't know how important it really is. So Johnny's like, dude, hit me, like, do it. And so pretty much after that download is to happen, we end up having this race against time for Johnny to get this information out of his head. But also, we have a chase against time also because everybody pretty much wants Johnny dead at this point. We have a lot of people who are to seemingly help Johnny, but in the end, they are just to twist and turn Johnny into people that are going to have Johnny get killed. So Johnny has to figure out who the heck to trust. Eventually, he bumps into a girl named Jane that is to have the black shakes or whatever it's called. It seems that there is about half of the world in this movie that seem to suffer from some kind of disorder of sorts. So we have seemingly Johnny has information that he does not know how valuable it actually is until really further down the line of this film, and then he's like, oh my god, like, dude, I only cared about me, I only cared about my life, but now the information that is in my head is like groundbreaking or world breaking, where now like I'm responsible for like half of the world being able to live a better life from this information. So and Johnny's trying to desperately get this information out of his head. Desperately. So now is about that time to just go into spoilers about this film. I kind of like it for its kind of bizarre-ish like approach of doing a computer phone call and all the kind of digital things that they try to do within this movie. Even though there are at some points in time where kind of the special effects that are in this movie are very goofy looking. Like this is like really some cutting edge stuff just for probably just that time. Uh, but it does still look interesting. Like I like how they try to attempt some of these digital things within this movie. It looks very bizarre, but also just kind of very interesting. So, with that said, I think that's all that I have to say about this movie in a very cryptic like sense. Go ahead and check it out. I think really at the second this recording, you can go ahead and check out this movie for free on Tubi, Tubi. It's a free movie and TV service. At the end of the day, you could say that you've seen any number of films just for free by just going into the app. There isn't any fees or any kind. Really, I've watched a number of films via going into Tubi and like, oh wow, great, this movie's in there. Like House of Wax, I think is in there now currently. Uh, I think Double Dragon is still in there. Some people could check that out if they've never seen that before, as well as checking out this movie. So, with that said, let's get into that coveted double five time territory to bust out this movie as quickly as I can try to get it out. Cause it's in that knock in there. It's in that space. It's in that safe space of brain where I'd watched this film, and now I'm going to talk about it. So let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to do spoil this movie. It is kind of a funny kind of concept because, in all honesty, man, I honestly kind of feel like Johnny in some sense, where I'm just kind of walking around with a bunch of knowledge that is in my head, and now I have to splidoo it out. Um, so I can understand where it's like, okay, I have like Batman and Robin somewhere in my head. I have Terminator Genesis somewhere in there, and like I have two, like one to two other films stuck in there, and then I also have this to talk about as well. So let's get into this. So in the very beginning of this film, we end up having, of course, like I said, we have Johnny who is to talk to a guy who is named uh, Ralphie, who is to talk to Johnny uh, about getting his long term memory back, and that we want Johnny or Johnny wants to be able to get every little bit of residual long term memory back into his brain because Johnny only remembers bits and fragments of his past, but we have Ralphie who is saying, "Well, yeah, like I think we'll definitely be able to do that for you, but the problem is like you need one last job to be able to do so. You need one last job to secure the money for us to be able to give you back your long-term memory. So you need a big fat job to go and that's going to give you a ton of money to get you your long term memory back because Johnny ended up dumping his entire long term memory, like a lot of stuff when he was a kid, so that way he could be able to afford to have the brain space to be able to have numerous things downloaded into his basically brain. So and we have Jane who's like, well, can you just like is it just that you can memorize fairly easy? And Johnny's like, no, like it just gets downloaded in my brain, like he doesn't even know exactly what it is. And so we have Johnny who ends up stumbling upon a job that is to cost what he is to need. So Johnny is to go along and meet these two men in suits that seem to be surrounded by guys with guns. We have Johnny who is to put a motion sensor in front of this door, and so Johnny is to getting to this door, before getting to the clients, he has to go into the elevator to double the capacity uh, of his of his brain storage. So he is to hold 160 gigs when he had previously 80 gigs. So we have these guys who are to come to him, his clients, to say, well, we need you to hold 322 gigs of data. And we have Johnny's like, yeah, sure, like we can go ahead and do that. It's funny when Johnny enters into the room to play that his briefcase is some kind of pizza. Like, anybody want double cheese, large, whatever. So we have Johnny who is telling them like, yeah, like the space of the space that you require, like I have the space for, even though that's completely a lie. And we have it to where these guys in these suits are asking John, are you sure? Like, we want to know exactly the number of space that you have, because any leakage that you'll get, like this, could kill you in 24 hours, or the data could get corrupted, or like you won't be able to, like, there's a lot of problems here that could arise. So we have Johnny who is confirming with the people, dude, I can take the storage. Go ahead, hit me. So we have Johnny who is to go with his setup to go and get this information. We have Johnny the uh, telling the guys to eventually hit some pictures on their TV, like to hit with some bizarre looking remote to scan some pictures on the TV, and eventually every single one of these pictures will be printed off. And so they can either keep these, or they can send them to whoever the person is they are going to send them off to, like fax or whatever. So we have seemingly these guys who are to send this thing off, and while they are doing that, they are to be interrupted by doing this with the Yakuza, with a guy named Shinji. So we have Shinji who is going on to basically just assassinate all these people who are to have Johnny download this stuff into his brain. So we have Johnny who is to go into the bathroom after this download to try and like zen himself into like being calm, and try to like concentrate on getting the heck out of there so he can make it to Norway, so that way he can, or Norway, anyways, so he can go take get transferred, or uh, take a drive to Newark, so he can go and get this downloaded via someone. So we we have people coming in trying to assassinate Johnny. We end up having, of course, Johnny who is to easily go and take down the guy that ends up coming into his bathroom. And so we end up having Johnny uh, who is to be able to kind of quickly and easily skate out of this room, and eventually go and change his appearance in the elevator so no one will recognize him. So we have Johnny who ends up scooting out of this apartment and out of this building. And so we have Johnny who is going and trying to, of course, uh, find anybody who is going to remove all of this storage from out of his brain. So we have We have Johnny who is talking to Ralphie to ask Ralphie, "Hey man, like, where can I go? Where can I go to get this stuff removed? Like, man, like this is a lot of stuff, and it's way more than I'm used to, and it feels like it's really hurting me. Like it feels like it's really killing me." So we have Ralphie who is to basically tell Johnny to go to this location, and so Johnny's like, "Well, that sounds like a really odd location. Like, are you sure about that?" And Ralphie's like, "Believe me, like go there." So we have Johnny who is to go on to this location that Ralphie had said to go to, and we end up having Johnny find these guys who are kind of really grisly and really just ugly looking dudes. And so we have Johnny who's like, dude, this is not where I'm supposed to be whatsoever. We have it to where really Johnny is going into a location that isn't normally where a guy in a suit would go to where we have J Bone, who is Ice Cube in this movie, going and seeing Johnny out in a place where he would normally be at to eventually find someone who is supposedly going to help him, but really actually is just going to try and saw off his head or just try to kill him. So we have Johnny who is to go and try to defend himself against these armed men, and we eventually have Johnny who is to seemingly run off from these armored men to eventually bump back into J Bone. And so we have seemingly Johnny ending up taking down one man, and we have J Bone who ends up taking out the other. So we have seemingly J Bone telling Johnny that, hey man, like, you don't owe me anything, like, hey, or like, I don't owe you anything, kind of, and like, and they just kind of go their separate ways. So we eventually have Johnny going straight to Ralphie and kind of just complaining to Ralphie. It's like, hey, like, why did you take me to a place where there were guys that were going to kill me off? We have, but we also have Ralphie who is to go on to be at this club where he has these bodyguards. We have Jane, a girl who seemingly easily gets the shakes when she has her hand out. And Jane is asking for Ralphie to have her be one of his bodyguards, where we have Jane who is to have her hand starting to shake. So Ralphie's to tell her, it's like, well, like, you can't do this kind of job. If anything, maybe you should probably seek some other kind of work that will let you easily be able to get some money without you actually having to uh, do anything like body work or bodyguard work. Because, like, if anything, like, you're not going to be able to do that kind of job with how you're going to get the shakes. So we have eventually we have Johnny who goes on to talk to Ralphie, and so Ralphie ends up taking him right back to people that are going to kill him yet again. We have Johnny who ends up getting strapped to a bed, to where we have seemingly uh, Shinji going like, yeah, we're gonna chop off your head because really that'll keep the information stored into your brain for us to just take it eventually. So we have Johnny who is to have Jane make her way into this room to jump onto Johnny's body to start to defend Johnny. And we have Jane who's asking Johnny, like, hey, with a really nice feat, like, I'll protect you. And so we have Johnny's like, well, 20 grand. And Jane is like 50 grand. He's like, deal. So we have Jane who is to pop in there and try to defend Johnny as best she can, throwing her knives and weapons of which that she has. So we have seemingly Johnny and Jane giving Shinji and the villains the slip. So we have Shinji who ends up just slicing and dicing Ralphie, killing him, and then trying to go after Johnny. So we have eventually both Johnny and Jane eventually at some point succumbing to their problems. We have Johnny who is to uh, need to rest because of all the data that he had collected, to where it seems like he's having some kind of almost seizure-esque like thing with all the data that is in his head. We have Jane who's watching over him as Johnny is sleeping. Johnny wakes up complaining, like, hey, like, why did you let me sleep? And Jane is like, well, you needed it. So we have Jane who bizarrely, like, takes every single thing out of her purse for, I guess, some reason that she'll need to showcase all of it later. She continues to just, like, she continues to kind of, like, tell you what all is in her purse. Like, at one point, we showcase that she has a grenade. I'm like, oh, okay, sure. I guess that's going to come into play later, I'm sure. So, we have Johnny who has decided to go and try to use Jane's phone card to eventually uh, call someone at this Famicon. Oh my god, Pharmacon uh, place. So that way, because it seems we end up finding out that it seems that we find out that Johnny is to be or let's backpedal a little. Let's backpedal. So because there's a bunch of information I kind of left out. So we have Johnny who is having his problems, and we also have Jane who is also having her problems as well. She's having the black shakes right in front of Johnny. So we have Jane who is to tell Johnny that she needs to go to a doctor who is named Spider. So we have Johnny who is to eventually go and try to get some information onto the web before Jane is to have the black shakes. And so we have Johnny who is trying to figure out where these two suited guys that were downloading Johnny's information, where they were sending this information from. And so we have Johnny who opens up the information to read that it just says Dr. Alcom, which doesn't make any sense to him. So we have Johnny who is desperately clinging on to anybody that could quite possibly help him have or help him get any information about what is going on with him. And that just leads to nowhere, to where Jane is to tell Johnny to go to Spider. So we have Johnny and Jane going to Spider to have uh, Spider help Jane with the black shakes once she gets them, and to help Johnny with some information to just with what Johnny quite possibly has, we have Spider who ends up looking into it to see what exactly it is. So while that is going on, we end up having the main villain of this film, who is Takahashi, who is to call upon a preacher that is an assassin, who is Dolph Lundgren, who was like, yeah, like, oh yeah, I remember, like, Dolph is in this movie. He plays like a really weird character. So we have this preacher who is to ask Takahashi if he is to either have uh, somebody um, meet Jesus or to meet him. And so we have Takahashi who is to tell the preacher to just like, yeah, just save him the head. That's all that matters. So we have this preacher who is going and tracking down Johnny. And it seems that this preacher likes to do these implants on his body. And so, like, it seems like there's a lot of metal coursing through that guy's uh, body. So we have it to where Spider is to have Johnny and Jane go with him to this hospital, this kind of underground hospital. While Spider is to go with Johnny and Jane and drive to this hospital, we have the preacher who is to basically bump into this car to where Spider is to swerve around this preacher to try to get away from him. We have Johnny's like, hey, who the heck is that? And Spider is like, no one you ever want to meet. So we have Spider who is to go to the hospital, this hospital, this kind of underground hospital, to one, Spider is to tell Johnny that the main reason why people in this world are to get the black shakes is because of technology. Stuff like computers and lights and whatever. Every little bit of technology is to make people get the black shakes, but sadly, this technology is something they desperately need in their lives, but it's also hurting a lot of people. So we have Johnny who is to ask who the heck is Dr. Allcome. And so we have Spider who is to let Johnny know that Dr. Allcome is a phrase that doctors would use if uh, there is some kind of code going on where there is some kind of crazy guy in the loose and doctors have to handle it, or if there's something serious going on that they don't want to concern the rest of the patients with by calling out a Dr. Allcome. So we have it to where also Spider is to tell Johnny that it seems that he has some kind of information from the Pharmacom company, and it seems to be the cure for the black shakes. Spider is to tell Jane that if she is to get this cure, like she'll be fine in weeks' time. So we have it to where now Johnny is realizing this information, and like he seems to have like the fate of the world in his head. So we have it to where Spider is to really not know anybody that really can uh, get this information out of Johnny. We have Spider who is to basically go on and say like, well, maybe I can right now get the information out of your head and get this leaked out of somewhere, like get this to be going out of here. We have it to where Spider is to basically tell Johnny, it's like, well, yeah, if we probably do this procedure, you're probably going to lose a lot of like motor function and all kinds of things, and maybe you'll end up being a vegetable after all this. And Johnny's like, what? Like, no, like I want a true, like, I want this whole thing out of me, and I want to be completely 100% fine. And so we have it to where Spider is like, no, like, if anything, like, we desperately need this information. Like, if anything, you're probably just gonna die anyways if you don't get this information out of you. So, like, beggars can't be choosers there, buddy. And your cure, your thing in your head is a cure for something that's affecting a lot of people. So, we have Johnny who is not letting Spider do this cure on him, and so we end up having the preacher who is to arrive at this hospital to try and take down Johnny, Spider, and Jane. We have we have it to where the preacher is to make it to Johnny, Spider, and Jane to eventually have Jane and Johnny run off to have them locate J Bone to be able to get this information out from him, because that seems to be the last place to find anybody who can take this information out is, I guess, J Bone. So the guy that Johnny had met earlier in this movie. So we have the preacher who is to go and uh, take Spider, because Spider was to try and slow this preacher down, so that way Johnny and Jane could get out of here. And so we have the preacher who is pretty much just torturing and like viciously like hurting Spider to say, where are they going? Where are they gonna go? Spider tells him nothing, to where we end up just seeing Spider just bleeding and bloody and agony. So we have Jane and Johnny driving on into Spider's car to make their way to this bridge. So Johnny is like yelling like crazy to get anybody to come down there and to retrieve him and Jane. And we have the guys that are working with J Bone, um, who are, I guess, uh, watchers over this bridge, who are just kind of like, dude, I hear sounds, but I don't know what the heck is going on. We have one of the guys who is to spot Johnny is like, oh, he must be some crazy person. Like, whatever. So we have one of the people accidentally drop a flaming car onto Johnny and Jane to almost destroy Spider's car, or I guess he does. I guess they do just destroy Spider's car. So we have seemingly after that J Bone coming down there and retrieving both Johnny and Jane, realizing like, oh, like, hey, it looks like you guys had Spider's car with you. Like, is Spider here? And Jane is like, no, he's dead. So we we also have seemingly Takahashi, who is getting this virtual woman that is consistently coming in and reasoning with him. And we eventually also have this woman who is also talking to Johnny at some points in time to tell him to run, that people are coming after him. And like, I don't know who exactly, like, they kind of mention who this person is. Like, like, the virtual girl does bring this up, where she is like a person that was kind of run out of this company, and I guess she was just stuck being a ghost in the machine, a spirit in the machine. But she's trying to reason with people to try to get this cure out because it's the right thing to do. So we have Johnny who is going with J Bone to get this information out. So we supposedly only have one image that Johnny has, and the other people are to have the other two. The other, like the person whoever was to get this image sent out was supposed to have the other two. So we have Johnny who is to, I guess, have to try and hack into his own brain to try and get the other two images so he can be able to download this information, because that's the whole thing. Like, he can't just easily just download it, but there's nobody really left alive that could really give him this images. So but here's the thing, though. So we have Johnny who has to rely bizarrely on a dolphin to help him be able to do this whole experiment. So we have Johnny who is to, via one image, try to, with a dolphin's help, try and get this information out, but eventually their satellites and stuff end up going down. The power ends up going down. So because we end up having the Yakuza are starting to fire off rockets and all kinds of things to try to get J-Bone and his people's attention. And so we have J-Bone and people firing back to kill these people. But eventually we have the preacher making his way into this facility, and so does Takahashi. So, and plus we also have Shinji who ends up making his way into here as well. So we have eventually Shinji who is going after Johnny, and eventually both of them end up kind of like hanging on for dear life on the end of one container. And so we have Johnny who ends up taking Shinji's weapon, where it seems to be some nail on his finger is to detach, and you can like string your way into chopping off a man's head, because he has this like laser string at the end of his, like, it's a laser cut off the, it's weird. So it's hard to describe also. But we have Johnny who ends up going and decapitating Shinji and killing him off. We have eventually Johnny who is to seemingly bump into Takahashi, and so we have Takahashi who ends up getting shot up by uh, Jane, and so we have Takahashi who gives Johnny the other image, the second image, and then he ends up dying. We eventually have the preacher who is going into uh, attacking Johnny, and we have eventually where uh, we have Jane who is using the dolphin and his weapon of this like sonic weaponry to try and take down the preacher, and we have Johnny who ends up seeing that the preacher is holding one like one big piece of electrical wire, and so Johnny throws the other piece of electrical wire for Johnny to, or for the preacher to hold on to, and get completely and utterly electrified and is smokingly dead. So we have seemingly everybody taken out at this point. Weirdly descripted or whatever, but it is what it is. So we have Johnny who gets the second image and gives that to J-Bone. So we still have Johnny who has to hack his own brain to get the third image so he can be able to download this whole thing. So we have Johnny who goes into the interwebs of sorts as a digital uh, person, and so we have Johnny who is digital going and copying himself onto uh, the mirrored ground. So we have this uh, virus slash computer piece that is going to give Johnny the last image. And so we have Johnny's copy who ends up getting killed trying to get this information, but Johnny ends up slicing through this this doorway to get this image, which is the actual virtual girl, I guess, is the last image. So I guess supposedly we had Johnny who had to like ride the dolphin into getting to this last image. It's really weird. This whole like bizarre digital thing. So we have the whole digital thingy. Yeah, all that stuff, all that technical jargon. Bibbity bibbity boop. So we have Johnny who gets the third image, and so we have J Bone who is telling everybody in the world, "Hey man, like we have the cure for the black shakes. Get your VHSs out because it's VHS year. It's VHS time period. This movie is done way in the future, but people still have VHSs. Isn't that great? So we have uh, J Bone who is to tell everybody like get your VHSs out and record this because this is the cure for the black shakes. So we have them sending this out to the ether to where everybody's going to get a hold of it so that way they can cure the black shakes. So we have Johnny who ends up getting all of this information out of his head. And so we are also to have Johnny have this memory of some birthday. And so we have Johnny who ends up getting out of the headpiece that he was in, downloading all this information, and so all of it is gone. And so Johnny seems to celebrate the fact that it seems that all of his villains are dead, and that it seems like he is free from this information, and he seems to be fine. And so, really, we end up having at the end of this movie, we just have Johnny and Jane just kissing, just be like, yeah, like if anything, Jane is after X amount of days, she'll be fine, and so Johnny and Jane will be able to uh, go back to the way of which that they want to live their lives. Really, Johnny, when he was at that bridge, it was kind of interesting where Johnny was mentioning how like why should he be here? Like, shouldn't like he should be going and getting his clothes dry cleaned and uh, like uh, he should be getting room service and like being wined and dined and like why is he underneath this bridge, desperately trying to uh, get this information out of his head? Really just kind of Johnny is coming to the breakdown of like why has his life gone so far into the gutter the way it has. So yeah, like it is kind of an interesting movie to see like Jane and Johnny from like two different worlds eventually like coming together to eventually try and get this information out to save the world. But other than that, yeah, like interesting film. But at the end of the day, I think that's all that I wanted to say about this movie. I don't know. I kind of like the visual parts of it, but I also just like Johnny in this movie or Keanu Reeves in this film. Really, we have this like we can really understand like why he ended up doing like a movie like Replicant or Replicas, because really that movie is kind of in some ways just like this, to where Johnny is trying to replicate dead people into robots. And so really that's almost kind of like tech wise kind of like almost a similar thing where it's like you're taking a whole entire person and you're like downloading them from off of an actual body into a robot. Then eventually they end up finding a different way to do that altogether. Um, they end up kind of just cloning basically a human being instead of just kind of re-downloading the information from one actual person to a clone person of themselves, and then that ends up perfectly working out. But yeah, with that said, I am going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.